When my husband took his mistress's hand and walked up to the stage at the company party, I laughed and called my mom, withdraw all the investments. And that was how I drove my husband's company to the brink of bankruptcy. Hello everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I begin my story, I'd love to know which city you're joining us from. Please feel free to share in the comments. Now, let me take you into this story. The crystal chandeliers of the grand ballroom at the plaza were vibrating. I could actually feel the bass of the jazz band thumping against the soles of my shoes, or maybe that was just the pounding of my own heart. It was the 30th anniversary of Roger and Associates, the night my husband, Roger, had been talking about for 3 years straight. He wanted everything perfect. The imported orchids, the vintage champagne, the heavy velvet curtains that shut out the rest of the world. I sat at table 12. Not table 1, where the CEO's wife should be. Not even table 2 with the senior partners. I was tucked away in the back, near the swinging kitchen doors, watching servers rush by with trays of shrimp cocktail. My dress was a simple navy blue number, elegant but understated, exactly what Roger had instructed me to wear. Don't draw attention to yourself, Valerie, he told me this morning while adjusting his silk tie in the mirror. Tonight is about the future of the company. It's about image. I watched him up on that stage now. At 57, Roger was still a handsome man, I had to give him that. He had that silver fox look that clients trusted, the kind of charisma that filled a room. He held the microphone with the ease of a man who believed he owned the world. And standing right next to him, wearing a dress so red it looked like a fresh wound against the backdrop of the stage, was Tiffany. She was 26. I knew her age because I processed her payroll paperwork myself 6 months ago. She was his executive assistant, a title that seemed to involve a lot of late-night strategy meetings and very little actual typing. Ladies and gentlemen, Roger's voice boomed, smooth as expensive scotch. 30 years. It's a lifetime. We built this from a garage to a skyscraper. But a company like ours can't survive on nostalgia. He paused for dramatic effect. The room went silent. 500 guests, investors, competitors, employees, leaned in. We need energy, Roger continued, turning his body slightly toward Tiffany. He didn't even glance in my direction. We need youth. We need vision. And that is why, tonight, I am not just celebrating our past. I am introducing our future. He reached out and took Tiffany's hand. Not a professional handshake. He interlaced his fingers with hers. She beamed, lifting her chin, the diamond necklace around her throat catching the stage lights. It blinded me for a second. I am proud to announce Tiffany Miller as our new Vice President of Creative Development, Roger announced, his voice swelling with pride. And, on a personal note, she is the muse who has given me a new lease on life. Sometimes, to grow, you have to shed the dead weight of the past to make room for something vibrant. Dead weight. The murmur that went through the crowd was like a physical wave. People shifted in their seats. Eyes darted around the room, searching for me. They knew. Everyone knew. He was publicly discarding me, his wife of 32 years, like an old piece of furniture that didn't match the new decor. I didn't gasp. I didn't cry. I didn't throw my drink. Instead, I felt a strange, cold clarity wash over me. It was the feeling of a heavy burden finally being lifted. I looked at Roger, smug and glowing up there, thinking he was untouchable. He thought he was the king of the jungle. He had forgotten who built the jungle. I reached into my clutch purse. My hand didn't shake. I bypassed the tissues I had packed, expecting to be emotional about his success. I bypassed the lipstick. I pulled out my phone. The screen was bright in the dim corner of the ballroom. I scrolled past Roger, mobile. I scrolled past home. I stopped at the contact labeled the Iron Lady. I hit call. It rang once. Twice. Valerie? My mother's voice was sharp, clear, and awake, despite it being past 10 o'clock. She was expecting this call. We had discussed the possibility, the what-if scenario, but she had hoped we'd never have to use it. I kept my eyes fixed on the stage. Roger was now leaning in to whisper something in Tiffany's ear, and she let out a laugh that sounded like tinkling glass. He looked so proud. So secure in his power. "Mom," I said, my voice steady, cutting through the noise of the applause surrounding me. "He did it. He put her on stage. He called me dead weight." There was a short pause on the other end. Then, my mother's voice dropped an octave, turning into the tone she reserved for business executions. "Say the word, darling." I took a sip of my water, watching my husband raise a toast to his mistress. "Execute Plan Z," I said, the words tasting sweeter than any champagne. "Pull every single penny out. Call the loan. Now." To understand why that phone call was the equivalent of a nuclear launch, you have to understand where we started. You have to go back 32 years, to a coffee shop on the edge of campus where the linoleum was peeling and the coffee tasted like burnt rubber. I was 22 then. I was quiet, bookish, wearing thrift store sweaters and carrying a backpack held together with safety pins. I wanted to be judged for my mind, not my last name. You see, my last name is Sterling. As in the Sterling banking dynasty. My mother, Eleanor Sterling, was a force of nature who ran our family trust with an iron fist. But I hated the pretension of high society. I hated the men who looked at me and saw a bank account instead of a person. So, I hid it. I lived in a small apartment, drove a beat-up Honda, and never talked about money. Then I met Roger. He was everything the boys in my social circle weren't. He was raw, intense, and hungry. He grew up in a Rust Belt town where the factories had closed down, leaving his family with nothing. He had holes in his shoes, not because it was grunge fashion, but because he couldn't afford new ones. But his eyes, they burned with ambition. "I'm going to build something, Val," he told me on our third date, sharing a single order of fries because that's all we could afford. "I'm going to build an empire so big that no one can ever look down on me again." I fell in love with that drive. I fell in love with his potential. I saw a diamond in the rough, a man who just needed a chance. I thought if I loved him enough, if I supported him enough, I could heal the chip on his shoulder. I never told him about the Sterling fortune. Not then. I was terrified that if he knew, his pride would be wounded, or worse, he'd look at me differently. I wanted to be his partner, not his benefactor. The proposal happened 2 years later. It wasn't at the plaza. It was in a park, under a willow tree. He was shaking. He pulled out a ring box, and inside was a tiny, thin gold band with a chip of a diamond so small you had to squint to see it. "It's not much," he stammered, looking at his shoes. I picked up extra shifts at the warehouse. It took me 6 months. "But I promise, Val, one day, I'll replace this with a rock so big it'll weigh your hand down. I promise you the world." My heart melted. It wasn't the ring that mattered, it was the sacrifice. It was the 6 months of sweating in a warehouse for me. "I love it," I whispered, letting him slide it onto my finger. "I don't need the world, Roger. I just need you." I truly believed that. I believed we were a team. I believed that his ambition was for us, for our future family. I didn't realize then that ambition, when unchecked, is a parasite. It eats everything around it to feed itself. We got married at the courthouse. My mother didn't attend. She disapproved. She had met Roger once, looked him up and down with her piercing blue eyes, and told me later, he has a starving wolf inside him, Valerie. And wolves don't make pets. They eat until there's nothing left. "You're wrong, Mom," I had defended him, my face hot with indignation. "He's hard-working. He loves me." "He loves that you make him feel safe," she countered. But what happens when he doesn't need safety anymore? What happens when he wants power? I cut off contact with my mother for 6 months after that. I was so sure she was just being a snob. I threw myself into being the perfect wife for Roger. I worked 2 jobs, one as a librarian, one as a tutor, to pay our rent so he could focus on his big ideas. I cooked, I cleaned, I ironed his one good suit every single morning so he could go out and pitch his business plans to investors. And every night, he'd come home defeated. "They don't get it, Val," he'd rage, pacing our tiny living room. "They see a nobody from nowhere. They won't give me a dime. The banks, the VCs, they all slam the door in my face. I need capital. I just need a start." I watched him crumble. The light in his eyes was turning into bitterness. He was starting to hate the world, and I was afraid that hatred would eventually turn on me. I knew I had the power to fix it. I held the key to the kingdom he wanted so badly. I struggled with the decision for weeks. Revealing my secret meant changing the dynamic of our marriage forever. But seeing him cry at the kitchen table over a rejection letter broke me. I made the choice that would seal my fate. I decided to call my mother. The meeting took place in a neutral location, a private conference room in a downtown law firm. I had brokered a truce between Roger and my mother, but the tension in the air was thick enough to choke on. Roger was sweating. He sat at the mahogany table, clutching his business plan for a consultancy firm that would revolutionize corporate logistics. He didn't know who the investor was. I had only told him that through some distant family connections, I had found an angel investor willing to listen. I kept the sterling name out of it. When the door opened and my mother walked in, wearing a Chanel suit and pearls that cost more than our entire apartment building, Roger's jaw dropped. Mrs. Sterling," he stammered. He looked at me, confused. "Your mother?" "Sit down, Roger," Eleanor said, bypassing the pleasantries. She didn't offer her hand. She sat at the head of the table, opened a gold-plated pen, and looked at him. "Valerie tells me you have a vision. I'm skeptical. But my daughter believes in you, and I trust her judgment, even if I question her taste in men." Roger bristled, his face turning red, but he swallowed his pride. He needed the money. He launched into his pitch. He was good. Passionate. Detailed. But my mother didn't care about logistics. She cared about leverage. When he finished, silence stretched for a minute. $2 million, my mother said finally. Seed capital. To be distributed through a shell company, Athena Ventures. Roger looked like he was going to faint. $2 million? "Mrs. Sterling, I won't let you down. I'm not doing this for you," she cut him off, her eyes locking onto his. "I am doing this for Valerie. And because of that, there are conditions." She signaled to her lawyer, Mr. Henderson, who slid a thick contract across the table. "This is not a gift, Roger. It is a loan. A very specific type of loan." Roger was flipping through the pages so fast I knew he wasn't reading a single word. He was drunk on the number 2 million. His hands were trembling with excitement. "Whatever the terms are, I agree," Roger said, reaching for the pen. "Roger, wait," I said, putting a hand on his arm. "Read the fine print." "Mom, explain it to him." My mother leaned forward. "It's a callable loan structure tied to a founder's agreement. Athena Ventures is providing the capital. But the contract stipulates that Valerie is the co-founder and chief financial officer. She controls the books. And..." She paused, making sure he was listening. "If Valerie is ever removed from her position, or if her equity in the marriage or the company is compromised, Athena Ventures reserves the right to recall the full loan amount immediately. Plus interest. Plus penalties." It was a kill switch. A poison pill. My mother was basically saying, betray my daughter, and I pull the plug. Roger laughed. A nervous, high-pitched sound. Of course. Valerie is my partner. In life and business. I'd never remove her. Without her, I'm nothing. He looked at me with tears in his eyes. Val, baby, we're going to be rich. We're going to make it. Do you understand, Roger? My mother pressed, her voice cold. This money is tethered to your wife. She is the anchor. You cut the anchor, the ship sinks. I understand, Roger said, and he signed his name with a flourish. He didn't even look at the clause number. He just saw the check Mr. Henderson was holding. I signed next to him. My hand was shaking. I felt a mix of relief and dread. I had saved his dream. I had given him the wings he wanted. But I had also introduced a third party into our marriage, my mother's money. Congratulations, my mother said, standing up. She didn't smile. She looked at Roger one last time. Don't make me regret this. I am not a bank, Roger. Banks have regulations. I have a memory. As we walked out of that office, Roger lifted me off the ground, spinning me around. We did it. I can't believe you did this for me, Val. I love you. I love you so much. He kissed me, and for a moment, I felt happy. I felt like the hero. I didn't know that I had just handed a loaded gun to a man who would eventually learn how to aim it at me. We started the company the next day. Roger ordered business cards that said CEO. When I asked about mine, he kissed my forehead. Let's just get set up first, honey. You handle the accounts. You're the genius behind the scenes. Let me be the face. It's better for the brand if there's one strong leader. I agreed. I wanted him to shine. I didn't care about titles. I cared about us. And that was my second mistake. The first decade of Roger and Associates was a blur of caffeine, spreadsheets, and exhaustion. While Roger was out playing the charismatic visionary, whining and dining clients on the corporate card, giving interviews to local business journals, I was in the back room, literally and figuratively. I was the CFO, the HR director, the compliance officer, and the janitor. We couldn't afford staff in the beginning, despite the seed money, because Roger insisted on a Class A office address to impress potential clients. That rent ate up a huge chunk of our capital. To compensate, I did the work of 5 people. I remember one specific night, about 5 years in. It was 2 a.m. The office was silent except for the hum of the server room. I was pregnant with our first child, a pregnancy we would sadly lose a few weeks later due to stress, sitting on the floor surrounded by tax receipts. The IRS had flagged us for an audit because Roger had tried to expense a family vacation as a business retreat. I spent 3 weeks reconstructing every single transaction, finding loopholes, writing justifications, and organizing 5 years of messy expenses into a pristine defense. I saved us over $100,000 in fines. I saved the company from bankruptcy right then and there. When the letter from the IRS came back clearing us, Roger took it. That night, at a celebratory dinner with a potential partner, he laughed loudly. Yeah, the IRS tried to come at me, he bragged, swirling his wine. But I went down there and charmed the agent. Told them, look, I'm building jobs here. They backed off. You have to know how to handle authority. I sat there, cutting my steak, saying nothing. He didn't mention the 3 weeks I spent sleeping on the office floor. He didn't mention my accounting degree. He didn't mention me. As the company grew, so did the shadow I lived in. We hired staff, accountants, sales reps, assistants. But Roger established a culture where I was viewed as Roger's wife who helps out, not the co-founder. It's better optics, Val, he told me when I asked for my name on the website's leadership page. Investors get nervous about husband and wife teams. They think it's unprofessional. They worry about divorce ruining the company. Let's just keep you as a consultant on paper. But I'm not a consultant, Roger. I control the finances, I argued. And you're brilliant at it, he soothed, massaging my shoulders. Everyone knows you're the boss at home. Let me have this, Val. I need the respect. He always made it about his fragile ego. And because I loved him, and because I remembered the boy with holes in his shoes, I relented. I became the ghost. I managed the Athena Ventures relationship, sending quarterly reports to my mother. She would call me after reading them. Profits are up, but his personal spending is trending high, Valerie, she'd warn. Why is the entertainment budget triple what it was last year? He's landing big whales, Mom. You have to spend money to make money, I defended him, covering his tracks. He's spending money to feed his vanity, she corrected. Keep a close eye on the miscellaneous category. I ignored her warnings. I was too busy managing the expansion. We opened offices in Chicago and Miami. We moved into a mansion in the suburbs. We bought the luxury cars. To the outside world, Roger was the self-made titan of industry. I was just the lucky woman he came home to. But the dynamic at home was shifting. The gratitude he used to show was replaced by entitlement. He stopped asking, "What do you think?" and started saying, "Handle this." I wasn't his partner anymore. I was his fixer. And then, the family started coming out of the woodwork. Roger's success acted like a beacon for every relative who had ignored him when he was poor. Suddenly, they were at our dinner table every weekend. And that's when the real isolation began. They didn't just want his money, they wanted to prove that he was the genius and I was the leech. I remember the first time I felt truly invisible. It was at a company picnic. An employee, a young analyst, came up to me. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said politely. "Could you tell me where the restroom is? You're with the catering staff, right?" I looked down at my simple dress, then over at Roger, who was holding court in an Italian suit. He heard the comment. He saw the analyst mistake his co-founder for the help. Roger didn't correct him. He just laughed. "She's the boss of the kitchen, that's for sure. Restrooms are down the hall, kid." I smiled, gave the directions, and walked away. But inside, a piece of my love for him quietly withered and died. I wasn't just invisible to the world, I was becoming invisible to him. And invisibility is a dangerous thing, because when people can't see you, they assume you can't see them. They assume you aren't watching. But I was watching. I saw everything. If Roger was the king of his delusions, his sister Brenda was the court jester who whispered poison in his ear. Brenda had ignored Roger for years when we were struggling. She wouldn't even loan him $50 to fix a flat tire back in 1995. But now that Roger was featured in Business Weekly, Brenda was suddenly the doting big sister. She and her husband, Dave, and their 2 spoiled sons became fixtures in my house. They treated my home like a hotel and me like the concierge. But the worst part wasn't the mess, it was the constant, dripping criticism disguised as family talk. It culminated on Thanksgiving, 2 years ago. I had spent 3 days prepping. I brined the turkey, I made the cranberry sauce from scratch, I polished the silver. I wanted everything perfect because Roger had been distant lately, and I thought a nice family holiday would bring us back together. We sat down to dinner. The table was groaning under the weight of the food. Brenda took a sip of the wine I had poured, a vintage Pinot Noir that cost a fortune. "A bit acidic, isn't it?" she said, wrinkling her nose. "Roger, you really need to hire a sommelier for these things. You have the money now. Why are you still letting Valerie pick the wine?" Roger didn't look up from his turkey. "It's fine, Brenda. It's just that." Brenda gestured around the room with her fork. "You're a CEO now, Rog. You're a public figure. Image is everything. And frankly, she turned her gaze on me, looking me up and down. I was wearing an apron over my dress, my hair slightly frizzy from the steam of the kitchen. Valerie looks tired. Worn out. It reflects poorly on the brand. My hand tightened on my fork. I look tired because I cooked this entire meal for 12 people, Brenda. While you watched football. See? Brenda laughed, looking at Roger. So defensive. I'm just saying, Roger, look at the wives of the other executives. They're polished. They go to the gym. They get work done. Valerie looks like she's still stuck in the library. Have you thought about maybe getting her a stylist? Or a membership to a medical spa? The table went silent. Even her kids stopped chewing. It was a direct, brutal attack on my appearance, my age, and my worth. I looked at Roger. This was the moment. This was where a husband says, "Shut up, Brenda. My wife is beautiful and she built this life for us." Roger took a slow sip of his wine. He looked at me, really looked at me, critical and cold. "She has a point, Val," Roger said. He didn't say it with malice, which somehow made it worse. He said it like it was a business fact. "You have let yourself go a bit lately. We have that gala coming up in New York. Maybe you should talk to Brenda. Get some tips. We need to look the part." The air left the room. My heart hammered against my ribs. My own husband had just validated his sister's cruelty in front of his entire family. "I handle the company's finances, Roger," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "I manage the investments. I don't have time to spend 4 hours a day at a spa." "And maybe that's the problem," Brenda interjected, smiling like a shark. "Maybe you should step back from the business, Valerie. Roger was saying just the other day that he needs real professionals now. Not family help. You could retire. Enjoy the money. Let Roger handle the heavy lifting." "Roger said that?" I looked at him. Roger wiped his mouth with a napkin. "We're scaling up, Val. It's getting complicated. We need a CFO with public market experience. I was going to talk to you about it. It might be time for you to transition to a more domestic role. You'd be happier. Less stress. Transition. Domestic role." He wasn't just insulting my looks, he was planning to push me out of the company I built. He wanted to send me out to pasture so he could hoard all the glory. "I see," I said quietly. I stood up. "I think I've lost my appetite." "Oh, don't be dramatic, Valerie," Brenda called out as I walked toward the kitchen. "We're just trying to help you level up." I stood in the kitchen, staring at the pile of dirty dishes. I realized then that I was entirely alone in this house. These people were parasites. And my husband, the host, was feeding them pieces of me. That night, Roger didn't apologize. He slept in the guest room because my mood was ruining his vibe. That Thanksgiving was the turning point. It was when the sadness turned into something harder. Something calcified. I stopped trying to impress them. I stopped trying to be the perfect wife. I started watching. I started listening. And I started waiting for the other shoe to drop. I didn't have to wait long. 6 months later, the other shoe walked in wearing 6-inch stilettos and a dress that cost more than my first car. Tiffany didn't walk, she prowled. I first met her when Roger hired a new batch of administrative staff. He told me he needed a personal executive assistant to handle his increasingly complex schedule. Someone young, energetic, he had said. Someone who understands the digital age. Tiffany was certainly young. 25 at the time, fresh out of a mediocre college with a degree in marketing that she barely used. But she had other qualifications that Roger evidently found indispensable. She had wide, admiring eyes. She had a laugh that made men feel witty. And she had an uncanny ability to stroke Roger's ego until it purred. I came into the office about 3 weeks after she started to drop off some tax documents. The atmosphere in the executive suite had changed. Usually, it was quiet, serious. Now, there was pop music playing softly. Tiffany was sitting at the desk outside Roger's office, a desk that used to be manned by Mrs. Higgins, a 60-year-old grandmother who was efficient and professional. Mrs. Higgins had been retired early, I later found out. "Can I help you?" Tiffany asked, not looking up from her phone. She was popping gum. "I'm Valerie." "Roger's wife," I said, keeping my tone polite. "I need to leave these for him." Her head snapped up. Her eyes scanned me, cataloging my shoes, sensible flats, my bag, last season, and my lack of makeup. A smirk played on her lips. It wasn't a smile of welcome, it was the smile of a predator spotting a wounded gazelle. "Oh. Mrs. Sterling. I mean, Mrs. Roger." "Right." She giggled. "Roger is in a conference. He said no interruptions. Especially, family stuff. He's super stressed." "This isn't family stuff. It's the quarterly tax filings. Unless he wants the IRS to shut us down, he needs to sign these," I said, moving to pass her. She stood up, blocking my path. She was wearing a tight pencil skirt and a blouse unbuttoned one notch too low for a corporate environment. "I'll take them," she said, reaching out with a manicured hand. "I handle all of Roger's urgent papers now. He trusts me with everything." The emphasis on everything was subtle, but it was there. "I'm the CFO, Tiffany," I reminded her, though my title was unofficial. "I need to explain the deductions to him." "Roger says you worry too much about the pennies," she said, leaning in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "He told me, Tiffany, Valerie is stuck in the small picture. I need someone who sees the big picture. I'm helping him rebrand. Make him look like the billionaire he's going to be." My stomach churned. She was quoting him. Those were his words. Stuck in the small picture. Just then, the door to Roger's office opened. Roger walked out, looking fresher than he had in years. He was wearing a new suit, slimmer cut. He saw me and his smile faltered for a fraction of a second before he masked it with annoyance. "Val? What are you doing here? I thought you were at the garden club." "I don't belong to a garden club, Roger. I'm here for the taxes." I held up the folder. Right. "Just give them to Tiffany," he waved his hand dismissively. Then he turned to Tiffany, his entire demeanor changing. His voice softened, became playful. "Tiff, did you book that reservation for the lunch meeting? The sushi place? The one with the private tatami rooms?" "Yes, sir," she beamed at him. "And I ordered that special sake you like." "You're a lifesaver," Roger said. He touched her shoulder. It was a lingering touch. A touch that lasted 3 seconds too long to be professional. I stood there, holding the tax returns, feeling like a ghost in my own company. "Roger," I said sharply. "The signature. Now." He sighed, rolling his eyes at Tiffany as if to say, "See what I have to deal with?" He scribbled his name without looking at the document. "There. Happy? Now go home, Val. Tiffany and I have a branding strategy session. It's going to be a late night." "Strategy session," I repeated flatly. "Yes. We're revolutionizing the image," Tiffany chimed in. "Out with the old, in with the new." I walked out of that office with my heart pounding in my ears. Out with the old. It wasn't just a business slogan. It was a threat. Over the next few months, Tiffany became the gatekeeper. I couldn't reach my husband without going through her. She started answering his work phone. She started replying to his emails. And Roger started changing. He came home smelling of a perfume that was too floral, too sweet, Tiffany's perfume. He started criticizing my cooking, my clothes, my conversation. "Why can't you be more fun?" he snapped one night when I asked about the budget. "Tiffany thinks we should sponsor a yacht race." "That's vision, Val. You just want to talk about savings accounts. You're boring." He was falling into the classic trap of the midlife crisis male, mistaking the flattery of a young woman for genuine connection and mistaking his wife's stability for stagnation. He didn't see that Tiffany was hollowing him out. He only saw that she made him feel like a god. And I knew, with the instinct of a woman who has tracked numbers her whole life, that the math wasn't adding up. Emotional affairs cost time. Physical affairs cost money. I decided to follow the money. Roger thought he was clever. He really did. He thought that because he was the CEO, he could hide expenses. He thought that because he had told the accounting department to route all executive discretionary spending through Tiffany, I wouldn't see it. But he forgot one crucial detail: I set up the system. I built the back end of the accounting software in 1998. I had a master administrative key that no one, not even the IT director, knew about. I called it the skeleton key. For weeks, I logged in remotely from my laptop at home after Roger fell asleep. I watched the digital trail of his betrayal unfold in columns and rows. At first, it was subtle. Expensive lunches. Client entertainment at bars that I knew didn't host business meetings. Uber rides at 2 a.m. Then, it escalated. I found a recurring charge for a consulting retainer paid to a company called TM Creative. TM Tiffany Miller. He was funneling $3,000 a month to her outside of her salary. Then came the travel. The Chicago conference that coincided with a charge for a luxury suite at the Four Seasons, in Maui. He hadn't gone to Chicago. He had taken her to Hawaii. I sat in my cold kitchen, illuminated by the blue light of the laptop, looking at the receipt for couples massage oceanfront. My hands shook, not from sadness anymore, but from rage. He was using our money built on my mother's loan and my sweat equity, to pamper his mistress. But the smoking gun, the piece of evidence that made me close the laptop and stare at the wall for an hour, appeared 2 weeks before the anniversary party. I saw a charge on the corporate American Express. The black card that was supposed to be for major capital expenses only. $12,500. Cartier. Date, October 15th. I clicked on the transaction details. It was flagged as client gift appreciation. Roger didn't have clients who required $12,000 jewelry. He usually gave them scotch or golf clubs. I dug deeper. I accessed the itemized receipt through the vendor portal. Item, platinum diamond pendant. Teardrop design. I instinctively touched my own neck. Roger hadn't bought me jewelry in 10 years. For our 30th anniversary, he had given me a vacuum cleaner because the maid was complaining about the old one. A vacuum cleaner for the wife. A diamond necklace for the mistress. I printed the receipt. The sound of the printer whirring in the quiet house sounded like a judge's gavel coming down. I needed to be sure. I needed to see it. Numbers on a screen are one thing, reality is another. I needed to know if he had actually given it to her, or if, in some pathetic corner of my heart, I hoped he had bought it for me as a surprise for the upcoming party. Maybe he was planning to apologize. Maybe he was going to acknowledge me on stage and put this necklace on me. Maybe the affair was over and this was his penance. Hope is a cruel thing. It makes you stupid. I decided to make one last surprise visit to the office. I told myself I was dropping off his dry cleaning for the party. But really, I was going there to see a necklace. The office was buzzing with pre-party energy. Decorators were moving plants around the lobby. Staff members were running around with clipboards. I walked straight to the executive suite. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I was carrying his tuxedo in a garment bag, using it as a shield. When I reached the top floor, the glass doors to Roger's office were wide open. He was standing by the window, looking out at the city skyline, one hand in his pocket, the other holding a glass of whiskey. It was 11 a.m. Tiffany was there, of course. She was sitting on the edge of his mahogany desk, my desk, the one I had picked out 10 years ago. She was swinging her legs, laughing at something he had said. And there it was. Resting against her throat, catching the morning sunlight, was the platinum teardrop diamond pendant. It looked heavy. It looked expensive. It looked like my stolen life. She saw me first. Her smile didn't falter, it sharpened. She touched the necklace, fingering the diamond possessively, making sure I saw it. "Oh, look, Roger," she said, her voice dripping with mock sweetness. "The dry cleaning service is here." Roger turned around. When he saw me, his face darkened. There was no guilt in his eyes. Only irritation. "Valerie? What are you doing here?" "I told you I'm busy prepping for the gala speech." I walked into the room. I didn't look at him. I looked straight at Tiffany. I looked at the necklace. "That's a beautiful piece," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Cartier, isn't it?" Tiffany's eyes widened slightly. She looked at Roger. Roger stepped between us, physically blocking my view of her. "It's a bonus, Valerie. For exceptional performance. Tiffany has been working around the clock." "A $12,000 bonus?" I asked. "Paid for with the corporate card? Under client gifts?" Roger's face turned a dangerous shade of purple. He grabbed my arm, hard. He had never touched me in anger before. But he was doing it now. He marched me toward the door. "You are spying on me?" he hissed, his breath smelling of expensive scotch and mints. "You ungrateful, paranoid woman. After everything I provide for you? You sit in that big house I bought, driving the car I pay for, and you dare to come here and question how I run my company?" "It's not your company, Roger," I whispered. "And that's not your money." "Get out," he snarled. He pushed me into the hallway. Staff members were looking. Mrs. Higgins' replacement was staring with her mouth open. "Go home, Valerie. Do not embarrass me tonight. If you say one word about this to anyone, if you make a scene, I will cut you off. You hear me? You'll be on the street." He slammed the glass door in my face. Through the glass, I watched him turn back to Tiffany. He shrugged, as if apologizing for the nuisance. Tiffany hopped off the desk, walked over to him, and kissed him on the cheek. She looked at the door, looked right at me, and waved. A little, dismissive finger wiggle. "Bye-bye, wifey." I stood there in the hallway, holding his tuxedo. I felt cold. I felt numb. But then, the numbness cracked. And underneath it, I found something I hadn't felt in 32 years. I didn't feel like the girl who hid her wealth to protect a boy's ego. I didn't feel like the invisible CFO. I didn't feel like the victim. I looked at the glass door, at the man preening in the reflection, and the woman wearing my money around her neck. He wants to cut me off? I thought. He wants to talk about who owns what? I walked to the elevator. I pressed the button for the lobby. I took out my phone and checked the time. I had 6 hours until the party. 6 hours to prepare. I wasn't going to cry. I was going to call my mother. And for the first time in my life, I was going to let Eleanor Sterling be exactly who she was, a shark. Roger wanted a show tonight? He wanted to introduce the future? Fine. I would give him a finale he would never forget. After leaving Roger's office, I didn't go straight home. I couldn't. The house was too big, too quiet, and filled with too many ghosts of the life I thought I was living. Instead, I drove. I drove aimlessly for hours, letting the rhythm of the highway numb the shock that was vibrating in my bones. I ended up at a small, windswept beach parking lot about an hour outside the city. It wasn't a picturesque tourist spot, it was gray, rocky, and desolate, exactly how I felt on the inside. I turned off the engine and just sat there, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. The replay button in my mind was stuck on loop. The necklace. The smirk. The way he grabbed my arm. For 30 minutes, I allowed myself to break. I cried, but it wasn't the pretty, cinematic crying you see in movies. It was ugly, guttural sobbing that shook my entire body. I cried for the 22-year-old girl who ate French fries and believed in a boy's dream. I cried for the babies we never had because the timing wasn't right for the company. I cried for the thousands of hours I spent staring at spreadsheets while he was out building a life that didn't include me. The sun began to set, casting long, jagged shadows across the dashboard. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. What I saw terrified me. I saw a woman who looked defeated. I saw the wrinkles around my eyes, not laugh lines, but worry lines. I saw gray roots that I hadn't had time to color because I was too busy auditing the Q3 reports. "You're old," a voice in my head whispered. "He's right. You're dead weight. Who starts over at 55? Who wants you now?" That voice was seductive. It told me to just go home, apologize to Roger for spying, and accept my place. Maybe if I was quieter, maybe if I lost 10 pounds, maybe if I looked the other way, he wouldn't leave me. Maybe I could settle for being the wife in the background, just to keep the roof over my head. It was the voice of fear. It was the voice of the Valerie who had spent 3 decades making herself smaller so Roger could feel big. But then, the light shifted. The setting sun hit the mirror at a different angle, and for a split second, the reflection changed. The sadness in the eyes seemed to harden into something cold and blue. I saw my mother. I saw Eleanor Sterling. My mother was a difficult woman. She was cold, she was calculating, and she was often cruel. But she was also a survivor. She was a woman who took over a male-dominated banking trust in the 1970s and made men twice her size tremble. She never apologized for her power. She never made herself small. "Wolves don't make pets, Valerie," her voice echoed in my memory. I wiped my face with the back of my hand. The tears stopped. I realized something profound in that cold car. Roger didn't leave me because I was old. He didn't betray me because I was boring. He betrayed me because I had allowed him to think he was the source of our power. I had handed him the keys to the kingdom and stood back while he locked me out. But he forgot who owned the castle. He thought I was weak because I was kind. He mistook my silence for stupidity. He thought that because I loved him, I wouldn't fight back. A strange, icy calm settled over me. It started in my chest and spread to my fingertips. The shaking stopped. I wasn't just Valerie, the scorned wife. I was Valerie Sterling. I was the woman who beat the IRS audit. I was the woman who managed millions of dollars of capital flows while he was playing golf. I pulled down the visor and looked at myself one last time. "You are not done," I said aloud to the empty car. My voice sounded raspy, but firm. "You are just getting started." I put the car in reverse. I didn't drive home. I drove to the one place Roger was terrified of. I drove to the Sterling estate. My mother was waiting for me in her library. It was a room that smelled of old leather, mahogany, and money. She was sitting in her wingback chair by the fire, a glass of sherry in her hand, looking like a queen on her throne. She didn't look surprised to see me. I walked in, my eyes still puffy, my clothes rumpled. I stood in front of her, feeling like a child again. "He bought her a necklace, Mom," I said. "Cartier. $12,000. With the corporate card." My mother didn't gasp. She didn't offer sympathy. She simply set her glass down on the side table with a deliberate clink. "I know," she said calmly. I blinked. You know?" She reached under the cushion of her chair and pulled out a manila folder. She tossed it onto the coffee table. "I've known about Tiffany for 6 months. I've known about the necklace since the charge hit the pending file 3 days ago. I also know about the apartment he leased in the city and the offshore account he's trying to set up in the Caymans to hide assets before he files for divorce." I stared at the folder. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you weren't ready," she said, her eyes piercing mine. "If I had told you 6 months ago, you would have confronted him, he would have lied, and you would have believed him. You needed to see it. You needed to feel the knife go in so you would have the strength to pull it out and use it." She stood up and walked over to me. For the first time in years, she touched my face. Her hand was cool and dry. "Are you done being a victim, Valerie?" I looked at the folder, then at her. "I want to destroy him, Mom. I don't just want a divorce. I want him to feel what I felt today. I want him to lose everything." My mother smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was a shark smile. "Good. Then stop crying and sit down. We have work to do." We spent the next 3 hours in what I can only describe as a war room session. My mother summoned her personal attorney, Mr. Henderson, who arrived within 20 minutes carrying a briefcase that looked like a weapon. "Here is the situation," Mr. Henderson explained, spreading documents out on the antique desk. "The loan from Athena Ventures, the $2 million plus accrued interest over 30 years, is technically a demand note. But the real weapon is the change of control and key person clauses we embedded in the founding documents." He pointed to a paragraph on page 42 of the contract Roger had signed without reading decades ago. Clause 4.2, if Valerie Sterling is removed from her executive capacity, or if her marital interest in the entity is threatened by divorce proceedings initiated by the co-founder, Athena Ventures deems this a material breach of risk. The lender reserves the right to recall the entire principal, plus a penalty of 15% compound interest calculated retroactively. Retroactively? I asked, my eyes widening. From day one, Mr. Henderson smirked. If we trigger this clause, Roger doesn't just owe $2 million. With the compound interest over 30 years, the debt load is approximately $15 million. The company doesn't have that in cash. They are leveraged to the hilt for this expansion. He's insolvent, I whispered. If we call the loan, he's bankrupt instantly. Precisely, my mother said. But we don't just want him bankrupt. We want him humiliated. We want him to lose his reputation, his credit, and his precious image in front of the very people he's trying to impress. She poured me a glass of sherry. The party is tonight, she said. He expects you to stay home, cowed and broken. Or he expects you to show up and make a messy emotional scene that makes you look crazy and him look like the long-suffering husband. He told me to stay home, I said. He said if I make a scene, he'll cut me off. Let him think that, she advised. Go to the party. Be the ghost he thinks you are. Let him climb as high as he can on that stage. Let him think he's won. And then... She handed me a burner phone, a simple flip phone. This is the detonator, she said. When he reaches the peak of his arrogance, you call me on this. I have the bankers on standby. I have the legal notices drafted. One word from you, and we shut off the oxygen. I took the phone. It felt heavy in my hand. It felt like justice. Go home, Valerie, my mother commanded. Put on the most expensive dress you own. Fix your hair. And for God's sake, hold your head up. You are a sterling. Tonight, you remind him what that means. I arrived home with 2 hours to spare. The house was empty. Roger had already left for the venue to do his sound checks and pre-party grooming. I walked into my closet. Roger had told me to wear something simple. Don't draw attention to yourself. I pushed aside the beige and navy dresses he preferred. I reached into the back, into a garment bag I hadn't opened in years. It was a black velvet gown by Alexander McQueen. It was structured, regal, and intimidating. It had a neckline that was tasteful but showcased the collarbones I still had. I sat at my vanity. I didn't try to look 25. I didn't plaster on glitter or false lashes to compete with Tiffany. I did my makeup to look like a woman of substance. Sharp eyeliner. Deep red lips, not bright, but the color of dried blood. I pulled my hair back into a severe, elegant chignon. I looked in the mirror. The tired housewife was gone. Staring back was the CFO of a multi-million-dollar empire. Staring back was the executioner. I drove myself to the venue. I didn't take the family car, I called a luxury black car service. I sat in the back, the burner phone clutched in my hand inside my velvet purse. When I arrived at the plaza, the air was thick with anticipation. The paparazzi were outside. Roger had hired them, of course. I saw him near the entrance, shaking hands, flashing that blinding white smile. Tiffany was hovering nearby in her red dress, laughing too loudly, touching his arm every few seconds. I bypassed the red carpet. I slipped in through a side entrance, just like the ghost he wanted me to be. I found my way to table 12. It was exactly as I expected, the table for the B-list guests. A few junior suppliers, a retired accountant, and a cousin Roger didn't like. Valerie? The cousin, a man named Jerry, looked surprised to see me. I thought. Roger said you weren't feeling well. I made a miraculous recovery, Jerry, I said smoothly, taking my seat. From my vantage point in the shadows, I watched the theater unfold. I saw Brenda working the room, telling anyone who would listen that she was the strategic advisor to her brother. I saw the bankers, men I had negotiated with for years, clapping Roger on the back, oblivious to the fact that their loans were about to turn into dust. Roger finally spotted me. His eyes narrowed. He excused himself from a conversation with a senator and walked over to my table. He didn't sit. He loomed over me. I thought I told you to stay home, he hissed, his smile fixed on his face for the benefit of the room, but his eyes dead. I didn't want to miss your big night, Roger, I said, taking a sip of water. Besides, you told me to be supportive. He scanned my dress. He seemed annoyed that I looked good. Annoyed that I wasn't cowering. Fine. Just stay here. Don't talk to the press. And don't go near Tiffany. If you ruin this, Valerie, I swear to God. Go, Roger, I interrupted him, my voice calm. Your public awaits. He hesitated. For a second, a flicker of unease crossed his face. He sensed something was different. The old Valerie would have been begging for reassurance. The new Valerie was looking at him like he was a bug under a microscope. But his arrogance won out. He adjusted his cufflinks, gave a curt nod, and walked away. Showtime, I whispered to myself. I watched him walk back to Tiffany. He whispered something to her, and she glanced at me with a triumphant smirk. She thought she had won. She thought I was sitting there in defeat, watching her take my life. She had no idea she was standing in the middle of a target zone. The ballroom filled up. 500 people. The smell of expensive perfume mixed with the scent of roasted lamb and ambition. I sat there, isolated in the noise. It's a strange feeling, being surrounded by a crowd but being completely alone. People I had known for decades, employees whose baby showers I had planned, wives of partners I had gone to lunch with, walked past my table. Some pretended not to see me. Others gave me pitying looks, the kind you give a terminally ill patient, before quickly looking away. They knew. The rumor mill had been churning. Roger is leaving her. The new girl is the VP. Valerie is out. Brenda, Roger's sister, made a point of stopping by. She was wearing a sequin dress that was too tight and holding a martini that was clearly her third. "Well, look who showed up," she slurred slightly, leaning on the back of my chair. "You've got nerve, Valerie." If my husband was parading his upgrade around, I'd have the decency to hide. "Hello, Brenda," I said, cutting into my salad. "Enjoying the free alcohol?" "I'm enjoying my brother's success," she spat. "He's finally free of your dead weight. You know, he's buying a house in the Hamptons? He promised to let me and Dave use it for the summer." "What are you getting? A cat?" "I'm sure you'll love the Hamptons, Brenda," I said, looking her dead in the eye. "If you ever get there." She huffed and walked away, muttering about me being bitter. I checked my watch. 8:45 p.m. The speeches were scheduled for 9 p.m. The lights dimmed. The spotlight hit the stage. The jazz band played a fanfare. Roger bounded up the stairs to the podium. The applause was thunderous. He soaked it in, spreading his arms wide like a messiah. "Thank you. Thank you all," he bellowed. "What a night. What a journey." He launched into his prepared speech. It was a masterclass in revisionist history. He talked about the early days, the sleepless nights, which I spent working while he slept, the risk-taking, with my mother's money, the solo grind. "I remember sitting in that garage," he lied, wondering how I was going to pay the electric bill. But I had a vision. I knew that if I just kept pushing, I could build an empire. He didn't mention the $2 million from Athena Ventures. He didn't mention the woman who managed the cash flow so the lights wouldn't get cut off. I felt a hand on my shoulder. I looked up. It was Mr. Henderson, my mother's lawyer. He had slipped in quietly. He was wearing a tuxedo, blending in perfectly. "Everything is in position, Mrs. Sterling," he whispered. He used my maiden name. "The banks have the notification. The process server is in the lobby. We are just waiting for your signal." "Wait for the introduction," I whispered back. "I want him to say it." "Understood." He stepped back into the shadows. On stage, Roger was reaching the crescendo of his speech. "But a man cannot build alone," Roger said, his voice softening. "He needs inspiration. He needs a partner who understands the speed of the future. Here it comes." "For years, I felt like I was running with a parachute attached to my back," Roger said. A few people in the crowd glanced at me nervously. It was a cruel, public jab. Slowing me down. Keeping me safe, yes, but keeping me grounded. My hand tightened around the burner phone in my lap. Parachute. That's what I was. A safety device he was cutting loose now that he thought he was flying. But now, Roger smiled, looking stage left. "I am ready to fly." "Please welcome," Roger announced, his voice booming, "the woman who has breathed new life into this company. My partner in creativity, and my partner in life, our new vice president, Tiffany Miller." The spotlight swung to the side of the stage. Tiffany walked out. The red dress was backless, plunging, and aggressive. She walked with the confidence of a woman who believes she has already won the lottery. The applause was polite but confused. Most of the investors knew she was a secretary 3 months ago. Promoting her to VP was insanity. But Roger was the majority shareholder, or so he thought, so they clapped. Roger met her halfway across the stage. He didn't shake her hand. He took both of her hands in his. The intimacy was shocking for a corporate event. "Tiffany," Roger said into the mic, looking deep into her eyes, ignoring the 500 people watching. "You are the spark I was missing. Together, we are going to take this company public. We are going to ring the bell on Wall Street." Tiffany giggled and leaned into the microphone. "Oh, Roger, stop. You're the genius. I'm just here to make you look good." She touched the diamond necklace. "And thank you for this incredible gift. It symbolizes our bright future." The room went deadly silent. Everyone looked at the necklace. Then they looked at me. It was the ultimate humiliation. He wasn't just cheating, he was flaunting the spoils of our marriage on another woman's neck. Roger turned back to the crowd, his arm around Tiffany's waist. "We have big plans," Roger declared. "Starting tomorrow, we are restructuring. We are cutting the old, inefficient departments. We are streamlining. And..." He paused, looking directly at my table in the back. His eyes were cold, triumphant. "We are finalizing a change in ownership structure to ensure that the leadership team, Tiffany and I, have full control." He was announcing that he was pushing me out. Publicly. "So raise your glasses," Roger shouted, lifting a champagne flute. "To the future. To Roger and Associates. To a new era. To the new era." Tiffany echoed, clinking her glass against his. The crowd murmured, raising their glasses hesitantly. Brenda, at the front table, stood up and cheered loudly, clapping her hands like a seal. My blood was boiling. It wasn't a hot, chaotic rage. It was a cold, focused, radioactive fury. He had just confessed to his plan. He had just handed me the trigger. I stood up. The movement caught the eye of the people at the tables near me. They stopped drinking. The silence rippled outward from my table like a wave. I walked out of the shadows. I didn't walk toward the exit. I walked toward the center of the room. My black velvet dress absorbed the light. I looked like a shadow coming to life. Roger saw me approaching. His smile faltered. He lowered his glass. "Valerie," he said into the mic, his voice echoing. "What are you doing? Sit down." I didn't stop. I walked until I was standing in the middle of the ballroom floor, directly in front of the stage. I looked up at him. I looked up at her. I reached into my purse and pulled out the burner phone. I flipped it open. The room was so quiet you could hear the ice melting in the buckets. Roger laughed nervously. "Ladies and gentlemen, my wife seems to be a bit overwrought." "Security?" 2 guards started to move toward me. I held up a hand. "Stop." My voice wasn't amplified, but it carried. I had projected my voice in boardrooms for years. "I'm not overwrought, Roger," I said, my voice ringing clear. "I'm just making a phone call." I pressed the speed dial button. I put the phone to my ear. "Who are you calling?" Roger sneered. "Your therapist?" I smiled. A genuine, terrifying smile. "No," I said, locking eyes with him. "I'm calling the owner of this company." "Mom?" I said into the phone. Roger froze. The color drained from his face instantly. He knew that tone. He knew who Mom was in the context of finance. "Valerie?" My mother's voice came through the phone, loud enough for me to hear, but I did something better. I walked over to the sound technician's booth, which was just a few feet away. The young kid there looked terrified. "Put this on the house speakers," I ordered. The kid looked at Roger. Roger was shouting, "Cut the mic. Don't do it. But the kid was confused, and I was scary. He plugged my phone into the auxiliary cord. Suddenly, Eleanor Sterling's voice boomed through the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel. Status report, Valerie. The CEO has just publicly announced a restructuring that removes the co-founder, I said, looking at Roger. He has also admitted to misappropriating company funds for personal gifts. Code red. Understood, Eleanor's voice was like the voice of God. Execute Plan Z. I, Eleanor Sterling, acting as the primary principal of Athena Ventures, hereby declare the loan to Roger and Associates in default due to material breach of the founder's covenant. Roger dropped his champagne glass. It shattered on the stage, the sound echoing like a gunshot. We are recalling the full principal of $2 million, plus 30 years of compound interest and penalties, Eleanor continued. Total debt due immediately, $15,400,000. A collective gasp went through the room. The bankers at table 2 stood up, pulling out their phones. You can't do that. Roger screamed into his microphone, his voice cracking. That's illegal. We have a contract. I took the microphone from the stand near the sound booth. Actually, Roger, I said, addressing the room. We do have a contract. Clause 4.2. You signed it 32 years ago. You were too busy looking at the check to read the fine print. I turned to the crowd. For 30 years, I have been the CFO of this company. I have managed the books. I have covered the debts. I have kept the lights on while my husband played the visionary. I pointed at Tiffany. And that necklace? Purchased with company funds. That is embezzlement. Which triggers the moral turpitude clause in our bank covenants. Valerie, Eleanor's voice boomed again. I have just notified First National, Citibank, and Chase. They are freezing the corporate accounts as we speak. The credit lines are revoked. Roger stared at his phone. It had started lighting up with notifications. Valerie, stop, he begged, abandoning the microphone and running to the edge of the stage. You're killing the company. We're going public tomorrow. There is no company, Roger, I said calmly. Athena Ventures owns the debt. The debt exceeds the assets. We are foreclosing. Right now. I looked at him, sweaty, panicked, a small man in a big suit. You wanted to shed the dead weight, Roger? Well, congratulations. You're lighter now. You have no debt, because you have no company. The silence that followed was heavy, electric, and absolutely delicious. CTA segment. The moment Roger's face crumbled, from the arrogant king of the world to a terrified man realizing he was standing on a trapdoor, was the single most satisfying second of my life. It was worth every tear, every late night, every insult. If you are listening to this and you have ever been underestimated, if you have ever been made to feel small by someone who stood on your shoulders to get tall, then you know exactly how I felt. If you're still here with me, please hit that like button and comment the number 1 below. Let me know that you are on my side. Let me know that you believe in justice served cold. Your support means the world to me, and it tells me I'm not alone in this journey. Comment 1 right now so I can see you. And now, watch what happens when the rats realize the ship is truly sinking. The chaos didn't happen slowly. It happened all at once. As soon as Eleanor said credit lines are revoked, the room erupted. It was like someone fired a starting pistol for a panic race. The bankers at table 2, the men who had been laughing with Roger 10 minutes ago, were already on their phones, shouting orders to their offices. Pull the term sheet. Now. Cancel the IPO roadshow. The financials are fraudulent. Get the legal team on the line. We need to secure our collateral before Sterling gets it. Roger stood on the edge of the stage, looking like a captain watching a tsunami hit his ship. He looked at me, pleading. Valerie, baby, please. Tell them it's a joke. Tell them it's a mistake. We can fix this. I'll fire Tiffany. I'll give you the VP title. Anything. It's too late, Roger, I said, my voice cold. You don't negotiate with the executioner after the guillotine has dropped. Suddenly, the lights in the ballroom flickered. Then the music system popped and died. The venue manager walked onto the stage, looking furious. Mr. Sterling, the manager asked loudly. We just tried to run the final payment for the event on the card on file. It was declined. Frozen by issuer. It's a mistake. Roger yelled. Try it again. We tried 3 cards, sir. All declined. Unless you have $50,000 in cash right now, we are shutting down the bar and the service. The humiliation was total. The guests, Roger's friends, began to flee. No one wanted to be associated with a fraud. They put down their drinks and hurried toward the exits, avoiding eye contact with him. Roger turned to Tiffany. He looked desperate. He needed an ally. Tiffany, call your father. Ask him to bridge us. Just for 24 hours. Tell him it's a misunderstanding. Tiffany was standing there, clutching her purse. Her face wasn't filled with love or concern. It was filled with calculation. She looked at Roger, sweating, screaming, broke, and then she looked at the crowd fleeing the room. She looked down at her phone, checking her own bank app, realizing that her company credit card was likely dead too. My father? Tiffany laughed. It was a harsh, ugly sound. My father thinks you're a creep, Roger. He only tolerated you because you were rich. Tiff, what are you saying? We're partners. The future. There is no future, she shrieked. You're bankrupt. You lied to me. You said you owned everything. I do. I did. It's just a technicality. A $15 million technicality? She stepped back, disgust written all over her face. Then, the unimaginable happened. Roger, in a fit of rage and panic, lunged toward me. He jumped off the stage. You bitch, he screamed, his face twisted into a mask of violence. You did this. You ruined me. He barely made it 3 steps. 2 large men in dark suits, my mother's private security, who had been stationed by the walls, intercepted him. They didn't tackle him, they just grabbed him by the arms and held him firm. Let me go. That's my wife. Not for long, I said, standing just out of his reach. I looked at him with pity. I didn't ruin you, Roger. You ruined yourself. I just turned on the lights. The ballroom was emptying fast. The only people left were the staff, the security, Roger, Tiffany, Brenda, and me. Tiffany was trying to sneak away toward the side exit. Going somewhere, Tiffany? I called out. She froze. She turned around, trying to regain some of her bratty composure. I'm leaving. I'm not staying for this drama. I quit. You can't quit, I said calmly. Because you're going to be named in the lawsuit for embezzlement. I didn't steal anything, she screeched. The necklace, I pointed. Property of Roger and Associates. Which is now effectively property of Athena Ventures. Hand it over. No. He gave it to me. She clutched the diamond. It was purchased with stolen funds, Mr. Henderson said, stepping forward. If you walk out that door with it, Miss Miller, we will have the police arrest you for grand larceny within the hour. The receipt is in the file. Tiffany looked at Roger. Do something. Tell them. Roger was slumped in a chair, head in his hands, guarded by the security men. He didn't even look up. He was broken. Tiffany looked at Mr. Henderson, then at the police officers who were just entering the lobby, summoned by the venue manager regarding the unpaid bill. With a scream of frustration, she reached behind her neck. She undid the clasp. She threw the Cartier necklace onto the floor. "Take it. I don't want your trash." She looked at Roger one last time. "You are a pathetic old man. I hope you rot." Then she turned to me. "And you're just a bitter old hag." "Maybe," I smiled. "But I'm a rich hag." "And you're unemployed." She stormed out, her red heels clicking on the marble, chasing after a young hedge fund manager I had seen leaving earlier. A rat always finds a new ship. Roger watched her go. The love of his life. His muse. Gone the second the money ran out. "She loved me," Roger whispered, more to himself than anyone else. "She said I was her soulmate." "She loved the lifestyle, Roger," I said, walking over to pick up the necklace. It felt cold and heavy. "She was an employee you paid with my money." "That's not love. That's a transaction." The room was almost quiet now, except for the sobbing coming from table 1. Brenda. My sister-in-law was sitting there, mascara running down her face. Her husband, Dave, looked like he was having a heart attack. I walked over to them. "Valerie," Brenda looked up, her voice trembling. "Valerie, this goes too far. You can't destroy the family. Think about the kids." "I am thinking about the family, Brenda," I said. "My family. The Sterling family." "But, the house," Brenda stammered. "Roger pays the mortgage on our house. He said it was a company perk for my consulting. Ah, yes. The consulting," I nodded. I reviewed those payments. $5,000 a month for strategic advice. Yet, I can't find a single email or report from you. That's called payroll fraud, Brenda. Brenda turned pale. We spent that money. We don't have it." "And the Range Rover?" I asked. "The one Roger leased for your son?" "He needs it for college." "It's a company car," I said. "Leased under Roger and Associates. Since the company is entering receivership, all assets are being seized. You can't take my son's car." Brenda shrieked. "I'm not taking it. The repo men are." I checked my watch. "Actually, they should be at your driveway right about now. I gave them the address an hour ago." Brenda stood up, knocking her chair over. "You monster! We're family. How can you be so cruel?" "Cruel?" I stepped closer, my voice dropping to a whisper. "Cruel is coming into my home for 10 years and eating my food while calling me useless. Cruel is telling my husband to trade me in for a younger model. Cruel is watching me drown and asking why I'm getting the water wet." I leaned in. "I'm not cruel, Brenda. I'm just balancing the books." "And you?" "You're in the red." Brenda looked at Roger, begging for help. But Roger was gone. He was staring at the floor, muttering. "Get out," I said. Before I asked the lawyers to look into Dave's contracting work for the office renovation. Dave grabbed Brenda's arm. "Let's go, Brenda. Shut up and let's go." They ran. They ran out of that ballroom like the scavengers they were, leaving their half-eaten desserts and their dignity behind. The weeks that followed were a blur of legal proceedings, but for the first time in my life, I wasn't stressed. I was in control. Roger and Associates was forced into Chapter 7 liquidation. Because the debt to Athena Ventures was secured and prioritized, we held all the cards. The beautiful glass office was emptied. The furniture was auctioned off. Roger tried to fight. He hired a cheap lawyer, since his accounts were frozen, to argue that the callable loan was unconscionable. But my mother had been thorough. Every document was notarized. Every breach was documented. The judge, a stern woman who seemed to take an instant dislike to Roger, ruled in our favor in record time. "Mr. Sterling," the judge said in the final hearing, "you signed a contract accepting capital with specific behavioral covenants. You violated those covenants by misappropriating funds for a paramour and attempting to disenfranchise the co-founder. The court finds for the plaintiff. Roger lost the company. He lost the house, which was cross-collateralized. He lost his car. But the final blow came from the IRS. Because I had handed over the skeleton key data to the authorities regarding the embezzlement and the fraudulent consulting fees to his family, Roger was facing criminal charges for tax evasion. I stood at the back of the courtroom when they led him away in handcuffs. He wasn't wearing an Italian suit. He was wearing a windbreaker and jeans that were too loose. He looked 20 years older. He saw me. He stopped. "Valerie," he croaked. "Why? We could have fixed it." "No, Roger," I said softly. "I was the one who fixed things. You were the one who broke them. I just stopped cleaning up your mess." He was led away. Athena Ventures bought the intellectual property and the client list of the old company for pennies on the dollar at the auction. We didn't keep the name Roger and Associates. We renamed it Phoenix Logistics. My mother appointed a new CEO, a brilliant woman I had hired years ago who Roger had ignored. And she appointed a new chairperson of the board. Me. 6 months later. I was sitting in a cafe in Paris, watching the rain hit the cobblestones. I wasn't there for business. I was there because I had always wanted to learn how to paint, and Roger had told me it was a waste of time. I took a sip of my cappuccino. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from the bank. The quarterly dividends from Phoenix Logistics had just hit my account. It was more money than I used to beg Roger for in a year. I wasn't lonely. That was the biggest surprise. I thought I would miss him. I thought the silence of my new apartment, a chic penthouse in the city, not the suburban mausoleum, would be deafening. But it was peaceful. I traveled. I went to the places Roger hated. I ate the food he called peasant food. I wore the clothes that made me feel powerful, not the ones that made me fade into the background. I started a foundation for women entrepreneurs, specifically for women who were silent partners in their husbands' businesses, teaching them how to protect their equity legally. I called it the safety net. One afternoon, while walking through a gallery in the Marais, I bumped into a man. He was older, with kind eyes and salt and pepper hair. He wasn't a CEO. He was a history professor. "I'm sorry," he said, picking up the sketchbook I had dropped. He looked at my drawing, a charcoal sketch of a wolf. "This is intense. It looks like it's hunting." "No," I smiled, taking the book. "It's protecting." "I'm Julian," he said, extending a hand. "I'm Valerie," I said. "Valerie Sterling." We didn't rush. We got coffee. We talked about art, not stocks. He didn't know my net worth, and I didn't care about his ambition. I liked his kindness. I realized that for 30 years, I had been holding my breath, waiting for permission to exist. Now, I was finally exhaling. People ask me if I regret it. They ask if it was too harsh. If destroying his company, his reputation, and his family relationships was necessary. They say, he was just a man having a midlife crisis. Couldn't you have just divorced him quietly? And I tell them this. When someone tries to erase you, you don't politely ask them to stop. You don't negotiate your own existence. Roger didn't just want to leave me. He wanted to humiliate me. He wanted to take the credit for my life's work and hand it to someone else. He wanted to leave me with nothing so he could feel like he did it all himself. My revenge wasn't about hate. It was about correction. It was about balancing the ledger. I visit my mother every Sunday. We drink sherry and play chess. She's frilier now, but her mind is still sharp. You played a good game, Valerie, she told me last week. I had a good teacher, I replied. If you are listening to this story, and you feel like you are invisible in your own life, if you feel like you are the dead weight keeping someone else safe, I want you to listen to me closely. Check the books. Know your worth. And never, ever give away your power to someone who doesn't respect the source. Sometimes, the person holding the knife thinks they are the hunter, but they forget who owns the forest. I'm Valerie Sterling. I was a ghost, then I was a victim, and now I am the owner. And let me tell you, the view from the head of the table is magnificent. Thank you for listening to my story. And so, as Valerie took her rightful place at the head of the table, her story reminds us of a profound truth: strength is not always loud, and resilience is not always visible. Sometimes, it lies quietly in the shadows, watching, waiting, until the moment comes to reclaim what was always yours. This is not just a tale of revenge, it's a testament to self-worth, to knowing when to stand up and say, enough. Life will test us, often in ways that feel unfair or overwhelming. But it's in these moments of darkness that we discover the depth of our courage and the power of our choices. Valerie's journey is a reminder that no one has the right to diminish us, and that our value is not defined by how others perceive us but by how we perceive ourselves. It's about taking back control, not out of spite, but to restore balance and dignity. What about you? Have you ever felt invisible or underestimated? Share your thoughts below, or simply comment good if this story inspired you. Let's continue to support and empower each other to rise above life's challenges.